What does it mean to be a fantasy football bust? Well, it's pretty simple, right? It's not now this guy got injured, he was a bust. No, you can't see that coming. It's when you are having high expectations, whether that's yourself, your friends, you listen to a podcaster, this jabroni right here, and those expectations are not met just because the player was not as good or the situation was not as ripe as you thought it was. But sometimes it's just fugazi. It's like, what are you doing? This guy is clearly not going to produce anything. And sometimes it's not, the top 5 running back that didn't finish in the top 5 is no. Sometimes it's just this RB 30 going off the board right now. That's right, as a borderline RB2 to RB3 is being drafted where he is when he's barely inside my top 40. And by inside, I mean he's my number 40 overall running back right now. And although we have not yet named him, I just want to drive home the point that 10 spots in just the running back rankings is a lot in the overall draft. If you're drafting somebody off the board at RB30 or around there, you're saying you feel comfortable with them as your potentially second running back or definitely your third running back at that point, no matter what. And I would like to say that I don't want this guy at all. Based on where I have him ranked, I won't get him. Based on where you, the users of the 2021 Supreme Draft Guide, the best draft guide on the market as well, you won't get him, and that's a good thing. Hopefully, if you don't have the guide, you'll get it, or you just avoid this landmine out there. But I wouldn't draft this running back as my RB3. Definitely not my RB2, not my RB4, maybe my RB5, but he'll never fall there. And that's okay, because he's going to be a bust. And that man's name is James Robinson. And Robinson became a bust the second Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, on draft night, uttered the words at pick 1.25, that is the 25th pick of the first round, Travis Etienne, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yes. No, James Robinson was not dead when they signed Carlos Hyde. James Robinson is a better and 10 years younger, almost running back 8 than Carlos Hyde. But when you bring in a 22-and-a-half-year-old Travis Etienne, who was easily the number 1 running back in college football last year and probably the last year and a half to 2 years when it comes to pass-catching abilities, you become a dead man walking. And we have a recent video on Travis Etienne and why it's the opposite of this. He's not a bust. He's a league winner. You can check out that video on the channel. There's a 2021 fantasy football playlist. You can check out that when you got some extra time, maybe right after this video. But yes, James Robinson is he's a walking zombie right now. So, I mean, you can look at what he did last year, but none of that matters. Like an 85% opportunity share, right? A guy who saw 50 targets. This is fantastic. Number 1 in the NFL in opportunities. Top 5 in carries. He finished as 7th overall as a running back in PPR formats, and that's with missing a couple of weeks last year due to an ankle injury, missing 2 weeks. But this was a guy who was never supposed to be there. Although some people who are really deep into the draft streets liked him. He's an undrafted free agent. You liked him because out of all the shitty undrafted free agents, he was the cream of the crop. And he was the 4th running back on a depth chart that ended up cutting Leonard Fournette, a depth chart that ended up seeing an injury happen to Devine Azigbo. And then, Armstead gets COVID at that time, which was very scary, and he sat out the entire season, still to this day having complications with that said disease. And when you're finishing as a top 10 running back, you're probably getting a couple things work your way. Not just the carries. He had 240. That's fine. That's good in 14 games. It's quality. But you have to have a pass-catching role, and you have to score touchdowns, right? And what did he do last year? Well, he scored double-digit touchdowns because he had so many damn opportunities, even in a bad offense. And he had the pass-catching role. He saw 50 targets last year. That was top 10 in the NFL for running backs. But now with Travis Etienne coming out of college as somebody who in his final 27 games, 2 years, had over 1,000 receiving yards and ended up with a 12.5% target share his senior year, having 48 receptions, 11 more than any other year his senior season, ranked number 1 in receiving yards and overall grading by PFF for pass-catching running backs in first down receptions and also touchdowns for running backs in college football last year. He's fantastic. He's going to take most of that work away. So let's just try and do some quick math here and talk it through for you. When a guy who finishes 7th last year in 14 games, the season, just everybody got hurt. So, I mean, for the most part, everybody, let's call him finishing 10th overall, right in that range, right? But you finish as a top 10 running back because you have that receiving role and you score the touchdowns. Let's start to see when you see Travis Etienne coming into the fold. And if you want in-depth analysis on him, we have that league-winning video that he's a part of. But once he starts to come into the fold, he's going to take most, if not all, of this work, right? Carlos Hyde's not going to take much or any, but he's going to take most, if not all, of this pass-catching work. That's his strong suit, is what he can do as a playmaker, especially in the receiving game, especially after the catch. Now, let's just say he loses 75% of this work. And you might say, 75%. This is a first-round running back. They hit 76% of the times as a top 24 running back or better when they're drafted in the first round. 76%. He's going to be used. They're already putting him into the slot to get more work in the passing game that way. He's going to be used in this backfield. He's going to be used as a rusher and a receiver. Let's say he loses 75%. I think that might be generous to give 25% of his workload last year in the receiving game to James Robinson again. So if he loses 75%, this is where he would drop in overall receiving numbers. He would lose 37 receptions. He would lose 2.25 receiving touchdowns from last year, and he would lose 258 receiving yards. That's a total drop from 2020 of 76.3 points just in the receiving game. We know Travis Etienne is going to take at least one carry next year, which is going to cut into the 240 carry workload from 2020 for Mr. JR James Robinson. Now that 76.3 drop just in the receiving game, not to mention what touchdowns are going to go away in the carries and the yardage on the ground when he had over 1,000-yard season, that pushes him from RB7 to RB22 last season. It gives him about 8 touchdowns. He continues to have those 1,000 yards on the ground and the other 25% of the workload. That is a big drop. And you might be saying, oh, well, RB22, he's getting drafted RB30. That's fantastic. That is taking just 75% of the receiving game, not the likely 40 to 60 to 75% of his carries. He ranked 7th in snap share last year with 74.3. He ranked 6th in carries last year with 240. That's 17.1 per game. When there's a first-round running back who's explosive, young, dynamic on your team versus an undrafted free agent in James Robinson who is not part of this new regime, this new coach, this new management's plan. He was not a part of it ever. He was not picked by them or signed by them. And he has no draft capital. They don't really owe him any money. You could be sure that that's 17.1 carries per game, even if it just drops by 5 carries per game, which, again, is giving the benefit of the doubt to James Robinson there. That's losing 70 overall carries last year, and at his 4.5 yards per carry clip, he's losing 315 yards. Now, I know you can flip the script and say, but what if he is fantastic and they like him and all this stuff? They wanted to draft a running back in the first round. We're just going off of some historical data points here. Undrafted free agents, even if somewhat productive, which he wasn't that productive last year. He just had a lot of opportunity. I mean, 4.32 yards per carry is fine. It's slightly above average or right around average in the NFL. 32nd in yards per touch, not that great. It's 32nd. It's not that great. The volume is going to shrink your efficiency, sure, but wasn't even in the top 20. So it's not like he blew the doors off. It's not like he was producing last year like a Dalvin Cook was or Christian McCaffrey when healthy 2 years ago, right? This was a running back who was getting fed a lot of opportunities and on a yards per touch basis was 32nd at the running back position. Just fine, especially for the price, just fine. But I think now investing in Trevor Lawrence, his teammate, and now investing in a first-round running back, they want a little bit more than fine out of their backfield. And as they already have showed, they're willing to pay for it. They've already paid Travis Etienne. He's already signed. His rookie contract is signed. A 50-year option on him. A lot of money to invest in the position, sure, for the running backs don't matter crowd. I get it. But now that they paid him, they're going to use that commodity. And the guy that they're not really paying, the undrafted free agent, I don't think they're going to. Based on my projections, my RB40 is James Robinson. He's being drafted at RB30. You who are part of the 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide, linked down below for free for a limited time only, maybe this might be the last video, limited time only, you also aren't going to get him. And there's a lot of other landmines in there that you should be sure to check out. I don't know why you wouldn't. Free is a pretty good perk right now. But thank you for tuning in. Do not draft James Robinson. He's going to be a bust. And I hate for you to be drafting him. Thank you for tuning into this video. I appreciate it. I'm Mr. James Robinson. Hey, you treated me good last year, James, but I'm sorry. That draft guide, like we just mentioned, is down below. And if you like and subscribe to this YouTube channel and hit the notification bell, you'll know when we're putting out other content. I appreciate you tuning in for the 2021 Fantasy Football playlist. That's popping up next to me, the subscribe button as well. Thank you. If you want more analysis on this type of stuff, you can check out that playlist. Enjoy the rest of your day, gang, and I'll see you all in the next one.